The evening sun was setting over the busy street as Maya stepped into the familiar warmth of McDonald's, the scent of French fries and coffee filling the air. She'd just finished another successful debate team practice where they'd been preparing for the upcoming state championships. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since lunch. The restaurant was relatively quiet for a Thursday evening, with just a few families scattered around the tables and an elderly couple sharing coffee by the window. Maya stood in line, scrolling through congratulatory messages from her debate team members. They'd chosen her to lead their opening arguments at the championships, a recognition of her hard work and natural talent for public speaking. As she waited for her turn to order, she adjusted her navy blue debate team jacket, the school's logo slightly faded from frequent wear. Her backpack, heavy with textbooks and her laptop, pressed against her shoulders. The day had been long but good. She'd aced her AP chemistry test and finally mastered that difficult piano piece she'd been practicing for weeks. At the counter, Maya politely ordered her usual, a quarter-pounder meal with extra pickles and a strawberry shake. The young cashier, someone she recognized from her school's junior class, smiled and chatted with her about the upcoming basketball game while processing her payment. It was just another normal evening, the kind Maya had experienced countless times before. The bell above the door chimed as two police officers entered the restaurant. Officer Reynolds and Officer Cooper had been patrolling the area, responding to a call about a shoplifter at a nearby clothing store. The suspect's description was vague. A young black female wearing dark clothing, reportedly seen running in this direction. Maya didn't notice them at first, focused on counting out exact change from her wallet. The restaurant's peaceful atmosphere shifted subtly as the officer's presence drew curious glances from other customers. The elderly couple by the window paused their conversation, and a mother instinctively pulled her young child closer. Standing at the counter, Maya finally heard the heavy footsteps approaching behind her. Before she could turn around, a gruff voice demanded, "Don't move." The command froze her in place, her handful of coins clicking as they scattered across the counter. The young cashier's friendly expression transformed into one of confusion and concern. The next few moments would change everything. As Maya slowly turned, trying to understand what was happening, she saw two officers staring at her with an intensity that made her heart race. Her debate team training kicked in: stay calm, speak clearly, assess the situation. But something in their stance, in the way Officer Reynolds' hand rested on his holster, told her this wasn't going to be a rational discussion. Time seemed to slow down as other customers began to notice the scene unfolding. A teenager at a nearby table pulled out his phone, somehow sensing that what was about to happen needed to be documented. The restaurant's normal evening sounds, ice clinking in cups, quiet conversations, the sizzle of the grill, faded into a tense silence. Maya's mind raced through possible explanations. Was there a mistake? Had something happened outside? Should she show them her student ID? The weight of her backpack suddenly felt like armor, containing proof of who she was, her school materials, debate team notes, the letter of recommendation her teacher had given her just that afternoon for her college applications. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Officer Cooper stepped closer, his shadow falling across Maya's face. In that moment, as she opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to understand, she didn't know that this ordinary Thursday evening would soon become headline news, sparking conversations about justice, prejudice, and the need for change in their community and beyond. Standing there in her debate team jacket, with scattered coins on the counter and a half-processed food order on the screen behind her, Maya couldn't have known that her story would soon become much bigger than herself. All she knew was that something was very wrong, and the next few minutes would test everything she believed about fairness, respect, and the systems meant to protect everyone equally. The evening sun continued to set outside, painting the restaurant windows in shades of orange and red, as the first part of this life-changing incident began to unfold. The security camera in the corner silently recorded everything, its tiny red light blinking steadily, capturing what would soon become evidence in a case that would shake their entire community to its core. Officer Reynolds' voice cut through the restaurant's tense silence. "Turn around slowly and put your hands where we can see them." Maya's heart pounded as she carefully followed the instruction, her debate team jacket rustling with the movement. The half-counted change remained scattered on the counter behind her, forgotten. There must be some mistake, Maya said, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. Years of debate training had taught her to remain composed under pressure, but this was different from any competition she'd ever faced. "I'm just here to get dinner after school practice." The officers exchanged glances, their postures rigid. Officer Cooper stepped closer, his boots squeaking against the recently mopped floor. "We have reports of a shoplifter in the area," he stated, eyes narrowing. A young black female in dark clothing. Maya's mind processed this information quickly. "I've been at debate team practice all afternoon," she explained, gesturing carefully toward her backpack. "I have my student ID, my schedule, everything. You can call my coach." "Stop moving," Officer Reynolds interrupted, his hand still resting on his holster. The other customers watched in stunned silence. The teenage boy who had started recording earlier shifted position to get a better angle, his phone capturing every word of the exchange. The young cashier behind the counter found her voice. "She's a regular here," she offered nervously. "She comes in after debate practice all the—" "Ma'am, please stay out of this." Officer Cooper cut her off without taking his eyes off Maya. The cashier fell silent, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the counter's edge. Maya took a deep breath, remembering the Constitutional Rights Unit from her AP government class. "I understand you're doing your job, but I have the right to explain myself. I'm not who you're looking for. My backpack has all my school materials." The situation escalated when Maya shifted slightly, her hand moving instinctively toward her backpack strap. Officer Reynolds immediately stepped forward, his movement aggressive. "I said don't move," he barked, causing several customers to flinch. A mother shielded her young son's eyes while maintaining a steady gaze on the scene. An elderly man stood up from his seat, leaning heavily on his cane. "Officers, please," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years. "This young lady is clearly a student." "Sir, stay back," Officer Cooper warned, dividing his attention between the elderly man and Maya. The tension in the restaurant had become almost unbearable, the air thick with unspoken words and mounting fear. Maya's mind raced through her options. Every debate tournament had taught her about the power of words, about finding common ground with opponents. But these officers weren't judges to be persuaded with careful argumentation. Their minds seemed already made up, their judgment clouded by assumptions that had nothing to do with who she really was. The evening light streaming through the windows cast long shadows across the floor, the golden rays contrasting sharply with the harsh fluorescent lighting above. More phones had emerged from pockets and purses, their cameras capturing what was quickly becoming a scene that would spark outrage across social media platforms within hours. Maya's voice remained remarkably steady as she tried one more time. "Officers, please. I'm a 16-year-old high school student. I can prove it. Just let me show you my ID." Her debate team jacket, a symbol of academic achievement just moments ago, now felt like a target on her back. The restaurant's security cameras continued their silent recording as Officer Reynolds moved closer, his patience visibly wearing thin. The smell of French fries and coffee had been replaced by the heavy atmosphere of impending confrontation. The young cashier's hand hovered over the phone beneath the counter, torn between fear and the knowledge that something needed to be done. Maya stood her ground, her posture straight but unthreatening, exactly as she'd been taught by her parents. "Whatever you're thinking," she said carefully, "you're making a mistake. I have rights." Her words were cut short by Officer Reynolds' sudden movement. The next few seconds would be replayed thousands of times on news channels and social media, analyzed and debated by experts and activists alike. The peaceful evening at McDonald's was about to become a flashpoint in an ongoing national conversation about law enforcement, racial profiling, and the power of video evidence in the modern age. The security camera's red light continued its steady blink, recording every moment of what was about to become a case study in how quickly assumptions and prejudice could turn a simple dinner stop into a critical incident that would change lives and challenge an entire community's understanding of justice. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Officer Reynolds grabbed Maya's arm, spinning her around to face the counter. Her debate team jacket twisted uncomfortably as she was pushed forward, the cold surface of the counter pressing against her chest. The scattered coins from her earlier purchase clattered to the floor, rolling in different directions across the tiles. "Stop resisting," Officer Cooper shouted, though Maya hadn't moved except for the force of being pushed. The young cashier backed away from the counter, but hands covering her mouth in shock. The half-prepared order on the screen still blinked silently. Quarter-pounder meal, extra pickles, strawberry shake. "I'm not resisting," Maya managed to say, her voice muffled against the counter. Her mind flashed to the mock trial scenarios they'd practiced in civics class, but nothing had prepared her for this reality. "Please, my school ID is in my front pocket." The sound of handcuffs clicking open echoed through the now-silent restaurant. The teenage boy who'd been recording shifted position, making sure to capture everything clearly. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept the phone steady, knowing somehow that this footage would be important. An older woman stood up from her booth, her voice shaking with anger. "This is absolutely unnecessary. She's just a child." Her husband gently pulled her back, his eyes filled with concern for both his wife's safety and the scene unfolding before them. The mother who had been shielding her young son's eyes now spoke up, her voice carrying years of familiar worry. "Officers, please. We're all watching this. She hasn't done anything wrong." Her son peeked through her fingers, his young face confused and frightened by the adult's behavior. Maya felt the cold metal of the handcuffs around her wrists, the sensation so foreign and frightening that tears began to well in her eyes. But she blinked them back, remembering her mother's words about staying strong in difficult moments. Her backpack, still heavy with schoolwork and dreams of college, was roughly pulled from her shoulders. "We received a report of a shoplifter," Officer Reynolds announced to the growing chorus of protests from customers. "We're just doing our job." His voice carried a defensive edge, as if he could feel the weight of the phone cameras recording his every move. The restaurant's manager finally emerged from the back office, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" "That's one of our regular customers." He moved forward, his nemetic catching the light. "She comes here after debate practice every—" "Stay back, sir," Officer Cooper warned, holding up his hand. "This is a police matter." The manager looked helplessly at Maya, then at his young cashier who was now quietly crying behind the counter. Maya tried one last time as they began to pull her away from the counter. "Please, just check my ID. Call my parents. Call the school. Anyone can verify who I am." Her voice remained surprisingly clear, even as her heart thundered in her chest. Years of debate training had taught her to project confidence, but this was testing every ounce of her self-control. The evening sun had nearly set now, casting long shadows through the windows. The restaurant's interior lights seemed harsh and accusing, illuminating every detail of the scene. The security camera continued its silent vigil, its small red light blinking steadily as it captured everything. Other customers had their phones out now, recording from different angles. An elderly man with a cane was on his own phone, apparently calling someone he thought could help. The teenage boy who'd captured everything from the beginning was now quietly narrating what he was seeing, his voice barely a whisper. "They're arresting her for nothing. She was just buying food. This isn't right." As the officers began moving Maya toward the door, her debate team jacket rode up uncomfortably against the handcuffs. The jacket that had always been a source of pride, a symbol of her academic achievements, now felt like a cruel irony. The Pledge of Allegiance they'd recited that morning in school echoed in her mind, with liberty and justice for all. The restaurant door chimed as they pushed through it, the same cheerful sound that had announced the officer's arrival now marking Maya's forced departure. The evening air felt cool against her tear-stained face, but she held her head high as they walked her toward the patrol car. Behind her, she could hear the voices of customers following, still recording, still protesting. The young cashier had finally picked up the phone under the counter, her hands shaking as she dialed. The scattered coins from Maya's purchase still lay on the floor, glinting under the fluorescent lights, silent witnesses to a moment that would soon catalyze change in their community and beyond. The half-prepared order on the screen finally timed out and disappeared, but the impact of what had just happened would linger far longer than any fast food meal. The fluorescent lights at the police station buzzed overhead as Officers Reynolds and Cooper led Maya through the building's stark hallways. Her debate team jacket was wrinkled now, her wrists sore from the tight handcuffs. The clock on the wall read 7:45 p.m., less than an hour since she'd walked into McDonald's for what should have been a simple dinner stop. Lieutenant Chen was reviewing paperwork at the front desk when she heard the commotion. Looking up, her eyes widened with recognition. The young girl being led in wasn't some random shoplifter. She was the same student who'd given an inspiring speech at last month's Youth Leadership Conference, where Chen's own daughter had been in attendance. "Stop right there," Lieutenant Chen commanded, her chair scraping against the floor as she stood up. "Release those cuffs immediately." The authority in her voice made both officers freeze. "That's Judge Thompson's daughter." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Officer Reynolds's face drained of color as he fumbled with the handcuff keys. Officer Cooper took an involuntary step backward, suddenly very interested in the floor tiles. "Maya?" Lieutenant Chen's voice softened as she approached. "Your father spoke at my daughter's career day last semester. He's one of the most respected judges in our district." She turned to the officers, her expression hardening. "Would either of you care to explain why you've arrested the 16-year-old daughter of a federal judge without cause?" The handcuffs finally clicked open. Maya rubbed her wrists, her composure remarkable despite everything she'd endured. Her debate training served her well as she calmly recounted the events at McDonald's, her voice steady even as she described the humiliation of being pushed against the counter. "My ID was in my pocket the whole time," she explained, finally able to reach for it. "They never let me show it to them." She pulled out her student ID, complete with debate team captain designation and honor roll status clearly visible. Lieutenant Chen's phone buzzed continuously as notifications poured in. Videos from the McDonald's incident were already spreading across social media. The teenage boy's recording had been shared thousands of times in the past 30 minutes alone. "Your father is already on his way," Lieutenant Chen informed Maya, shooting a withering look at the two officers. "He was in court when the calls started coming in." She paused, checking another notification. "And apparently the local news has picked up the story." Officer Reynolds attempted to defend their actions. "We had a report of a shoplifter." "A report," Lieutenant Chen cut him off, "of a suspect who was supposedly seen running from a store 3 blocks away. Instead, you arrested a high school student standing still at a counter, paying for her meal, wearing a debate team jacket." The station's phone started ringing incessantly. At the front desk, a dispatcher was trying to handle the flood of calls from concerned citizens who had witnessed the incident. The McDonald's manager had apparently given an impromptu interview to a local news crew that had rushed to the scene. Maya's backpack sat on the desk where Officer Cooper had dropped it. Papers had spilled out, college application essays, debate tournament schedules, and a letter of recommendation from her AP government teacher praising her understanding of constitutional rights. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Lieutenant Chen guided Maya to her office, away from the increasingly chaotic front desk. "Your father's going to be here in 10 minutes, she said, offering Maya a bottle of water. "But I want you to know something. This isn't going to be swept under the rug because of who your father is. This needs to be addressed properly." Through the office window, they could see more police officials arriving, drawn by the growing situation. The department's public relations officer was already on the phone, trying to get ahead of a story that was rapidly spinning beyond control. Maya took a sip of water, her hands finally showing a slight tremor. "I just wanted a burger," she said quietly, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "I go there every Thursday after debate practice. The cashier even knows my order." Lieutenant Chen sat down across from her, her face showing both concern and determination. "Maya, I know this isn't what you planned for your evening. But what happened to you? It's happening to others who don't have a judge for a parent or videos going viral. Your father's position means this incident will get attention, but it's what we do with that attention that matters." The sound of rapid footsteps in the hallway signaled the arrival of more officials. Through the office blinds, Maya could see department heads gathering, their faces grave as they huddled around a phone showing the McDonald's footage. Officer Reynolds and Cooper stood to the side, their earlier confidence replaced by growing awareness of the situation's magnitude. A text message lit up Maya's phone. It was from the teenage boy who'd recorded the incident. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," it read. "The video's been shared over 50,000 times. People need to see this." Maya stared at the message, realizing that her simple dinner stop had become something much bigger than herself. The station's energy shifted as Judge Thompson's arrival was announced. Maya could hear her father's authoritative voice in the hallway, controlled but carrying an edge that made everyone stand a little straighter. This wasn't just a judge arriving to pick up his daughter. This was a moment of reckoning, the beginning of a conversation their community couldn't ignore any longer. By morning, the McDonald's incident had exploded across social media platforms. Maya sat at her kitchen table, still wearing her debate team jacket from the night before, watching as her father fielded endless phone calls. The numbers were staggering. The original video had been viewed over 2 million times, news channels were running the story on repeat, and #JusticeForMaya was trending nationwide. "No, we're not interested in private settlements." Judge Thompson spoke firmly into his phone, his free hand resting protectively on Maya's shoulder. "This isn't about money. This is about systematic change." He ended the call and turned to his daughter, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "How are you holding up?" Maya scrolled through her phone, overwhelmed by the thousands of messages flooding her social media. The teenage boy who'd recorded the video had become an overnight hero, his steady narration of events praised for its clarity and courage. The young cashier from McDonald's had given several interviews, but tearful account of the incident touching hearts across the country. "The debate team wants to turn our next tournament speech topic into civil rights and police accountability," Maya said, showing her father the team chat. Her coach had already reached out, offering both support and a platform to transform this experience into advocacy. Outside that house, news vans lined the street. Reporters had been camping out since dawn, hoping to catch a statement from the judge or his daughter. But it was the other gathering that caught Maya's attention. Dozens of community members had shown up with signs and flowers, forming a protective circle around the house. The McDonald's manager had closed the restaurant for the day, instead hosting a community meeting in the parking lot. The security footage, synced with customer recordings, played on a large screen as people shared their own stories of similar experiences. The elderly couple who had witnessed Maya's arrest led a discussion about the responsibility of bystanders to speak up. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Lieutenant Chen. The department was launching a full investigation, and she wanted Maya's input on proposed changes to training procedures. "Your voice matters in this," the message read. "Your experience can help prevent this from happening to others." The doorbell rang, and Maya's father returned from answering it with an unexpected visitor, the mayor. She had come not for a photo opportunity, but for a serious discussion about police reform. She carried a thick folder of complaint reports similar to Maya's incident, cases that had been previously overlooked or dismissed. "Your father's position means people are finally paying attention," the mayor explained, spreading the documents across the kitchen table. "But these reports show it's not an isolated incident. We need to address this at a systemic level." Maya's debate training kicked in as she reviewed the reports. She noticed patterns, documented the commonalities, and began forming arguments for specific policy changes. Her father watched proudly as she transformed her trauma into purpose, but analytical mind already working toward solutions. Social media continued to light up with support. The video had reached celebrities and civil rights leaders, many of whom were calling for immediate action. But it was the local response that touched Maya most deeply. Students from rival high schools had started a petition for joint workshops on civil rights and community relations. The young cashier from McDonald's arrived with a care package from the staff, Maya's usual order, plus letters of support from every employee. "We're changing our training," she explained, "making sure all staff know their rights and responsibilities when law enforcement enters the restaurant." Lieutenant Chen sent another update. Officers Reynolds and Cooper had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But more importantly, the department was implementing immediate changes to their response protocols and racial bias training. Maya's debate teammate dropped off her missed assignments, but also brought news that their story had reached national civil rights organizations. "They want to work with us," she explained excitedly. "Help us develop youth programs about knowing your rights and community advocacy." As evening approached, Maya finally changed out of her debate jacket. Her father suggested she rest, but she was already drafting an op-ed for the local paper. "People are listening now," she explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "We can't waste this moment." The kitchen table had become command central, covered with proposals for police reform, community outreach plans, and educational initiatives. Maya's personal experience was transforming into a movement, one that promised real change in how law enforcement interacted with their community. Outside, the news vans were leaving, but the community members remained, holding a candlelight vigil. Their lights flickered through the windows as Maya worked, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. The hashtag continued to trend, but now it was accompanied by specific calls for action and reform. The Internal Affairs investigation room buzzed with activity as Lieutenant Chen spread dozens of files across the conference table. 3 weeks had passed since the McDonald's incident, and what started as a single case had unveiled a troubling pattern of behavior within the department. "Look at these numbers," she said to the investigation team, pointing to a spreadsheet. Officers Reynolds and Cooper have been involved in 27 similar incidents over the past 2 years, all involving minority citizens, all with nearly identical report language. She pulled up another document. And here's where it gets interesting. Every single complaint was dismissed during preliminary review. The investigation had grown beyond just 2 officers. The team had discovered a network of covered-up complaints, buried reports, and systematic failures in oversight. The department's Internal Affairs Division itself was under scrutiny for its handling of previous incidents. Down the hall, the police chief sat in his office, watching the viral McDonald's video for what felt like the 100th time. Each viewing revealed new details: the way Officer Reynolds had immediately targeted Maya, how Officer Cooper had dismissed witness attempts to intervene, the visible fear on the young cashier's face. "These weren't just bad decisions," the chief muttered, pausing the video. This was ingrained behavior. He picked up a thick folder labeled Officer Training Review, the first comprehensive analysis of the department's training programs in 15 years. Meanwhile, at the courthouse, Judge Thompson was meeting with a civil rights task force assembled to review police practices. The McDonald's security footage played on a screen behind them as experts analyze every moment of the interaction. "Notice how they didn't even attempt to verify her identity," a police procedures expert pointed out. "Standard protocol requires officers to check ID when available. They actively refused multiple offers to show identification." The room filled with murmurs as attendees took notes. Back at the police station, a young officer was giving his testimony to Internal Affairs. "I tried to report similar incidents before," he explained, his voice shaking slightly. "But I was told to keep quiet if I wanted to keep my badge." His statement would later become crucial evidence of a culture of silence within the department. The investigation team had set up a hotline for community members to report similar experiences. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of calls in the first week alone. Each story added another piece to the puzzle, revealing patterns that couldn't be ignored. Lieutenant Chen's office wall was covered with a timeline of events, connecting incidents, complaints, and dismissals over the past 5 years. Red strings linked similar cases, creating a web of systematic failures that could no longer be dismissed as isolated incidents. "Look at this," she called to her team, pointing to a cluster of reports. Every time someone filed a complaint, they were discouraged from pursuing it. The same language appears in the dismissal forms, almost word for word. She tapped her pen against a stack of identical responses. This wasn't negligence. This was deliberate. The teenage boy who recorded the McDonald's video had been invited to speak to the investigation team. His clear, steady narration of events had helped establish a timeline that contradicted the officer's initial reports. "I just knew something wasn't right," he explained. "The way they ignored everyone trying to help, the way they wouldn't listen." In another part of the building, technology experts were analyzing the officer's body camera footage from previous incidents. They discovered multiple cases where cameras had been conveniently turned off or footage had been marked for deletion without proper authorization. The young cashier from McDonald's had provided a detailed written statement describing not just that night, but other instances where she'd witnessed similar police behavior. Her account matched patterns emerging from other witness statements across the city. Lieutenant Chen's phone buzzed with a message from Maya, who had become an unofficial consultant to the investigation. The teenager's analytical mind and debate experience had proven invaluable in organizing and presenting evidence. She had a unique ability to connect seemingly unrelated incidents and identify common factors. The investigation had also revealed problems with the department's complaint filing system. Many citizens reported being unable to file complaints, facing intimidation or bureaucratic obstacles. A separate team was now dedicated to creating a new, accessible reporting system with proper oversight. As evening approached, Lieutenant Chen stood back from the evidence wall, taking in the full scope of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just about 2 officers or 1 incident, it was about a system that had failed its community time and time again. The department's public relations office was struggling to handle media inquiries as new details emerged daily. But unlike previous scandals, there was no attempt to minimize or deflect. The chief had made it clear, complete transparency was the only way forward. Outside the station, community members continued their daily vigil, holding signs demanding change. But now they were joined by officers who had chosen to speak out, breaking years of silence about practices they'd witnessed but felt powerless to challenge. The investigation was far from over, but its impact was already being felt throughout the department. Training programs were being rewritten, oversight procedures overhauled, and a new era of accountability was beginning to take shape. What had started with one teenager's wrongful arrest at McDonald's had become a catalyst for long overdue change. 6 months after the McDonald's incident, the community gathered in the high school auditorium for a town hall meeting. The space was packed, with people standing along the walls and spilling into the hallways. On stage, Maya adjusted her microphone, looking out at the sea of faces, community members, police officers, local officials, and students, all united in their commitment to change. 6 months ago, I walked into McDonald's wanting a burger, she began, her voice steady and clear. Instead, I got a crash course in civil rights, police reform, and community activism. A gentle ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, tinged with the shared understanding of how that simple evening had transformed their city. The changes were visible throughout the community. At the police department, Officer Reynolds and Officer Cooper had been terminated following the investigation, facing charges for misconduct and civil rights violations. But more importantly, their cases had led to sweeping departmental reforms. Lieutenant Chen, now promoted to captain, stood at the back of the auditorium, nodding as Maya outlined the new policies. Every officer now wore body cameras that couldn't be manually disabled. A civilian oversight committee had been established, with real power to investigate complaints. Training programs had been completely revamped, with input from community members and civil rights experts. The McDonald's restaurant had become an unexpected symbol of community transformation. The manager had implemented a new training program for staff, teaching them how to safely document and report incidents of discrimination. The teenage boy who recorded the original video now led workshops teaching young people about their rights and the power of documenting injustice. But the biggest change, Maya continued, gesturing to a group of police cadets in the audience, is in how we view community policing. The cadets sat up straighter, their faces earnest. They were part of a new training initiative that Maya had helped design, combining law enforcement education with community engagement and civil rights awareness. The young cashier who had witnessed Maya's arrest was now a regular speaker at police training sessions, sharing her perspective on how that night had affected her view of law enforcement and her responsibility as a citizen. Her testimony had become a powerful tool in helping officers understand the impact of their actions on community trust. Judge Thompson watched from the sidelines as his daughter commanded the stage. The past 6 months had been challenging. Death threats, attempts to discredit their family, political pressure to stay quiet. But they had persevered, turning a moment of injustice into a movement for change. The mayor stepped up to the podium, holding up a thick document. Today, we're not just talking about change, we're codifying it into law. She explained the new police accountability measures developed with input from community members, legal experts, and law enforcement officials. The legislation would ensure that the reforms couldn't be easily dismantled by future administrations. In the audience, the elderly couple from McDonald's sat with tears in their eyes. They had become regular volunteers at community police forums, sharing their experience as witnesses and encouraging others to speak up against injustice. Their presence was a reminder that change required courage from everyone, not just those directly affected. Maya's debate team sat in the front row, wearing their team jackets, the same jacket she had worn that night at McDonald's. They had transformed their competitive speaking skills into tools for advocacy, winning national recognition for their work on civil rights and community relations. The technology team that had analyzed the body camera footage presented their new oversight system. Every police interaction was now automatically uploaded to a secure database accessible to both internal affairs and civilian oversight committees. The system had already been adopted by several neighboring departments. Local businesses, led by the McDonald's franchise, had formed a coalition to support community policing initiatives. They provided spaces for meetings, funded youth programs, and established scholarships for students interested in studying criminal justice reform. The restaurant where everything had started now hosted monthly community police dialogue sessions. "What happened to me was wrong," Maya said, approaching the end of her speech. "But what we've built together is right." She gestured to the diverse crowd before her. "This isn't just about police reform, it's about community transformation. It's about what happens when we refuse to let injustice be the end of the story." The audience rose in a standing ovation, but Maya wasn't finished. She announced the launch of a new youth leadership program designed to empower the next generation of community activists and reformers. The program would provide training in civil rights, community organizing, and effective advocacy. As the applause filled the auditorium, Maya caught sight of a familiar face, the flight attendant who had sat next to her on her way to a recent speaking engagement. After hearing Maya's story, she had started a similar reform movement in her own city. The ripples of change were spreading far beyond their community. The evening ended with a commitment ceremony where police officers and community members pledged to continue working together for positive change. The pledge, written collaboratively by Maya's debate team and the police academy, emphasized mutual respect, understanding, and the shared responsibility for community safety. Outside the auditorium, the same McDonald's sign that had illuminated that fateful night 6 months ago still glowed in the distance. But now it stood as a reminder not of injustice, but of the power of community action, the importance of speaking up, and the possibility of transforming pain into progress.